Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have my November TBR / book haul video for you. I have a wide variety of books picked out. I have horror, sci-fi, fantasy, contemporary, and a short story collection. So I think November is going to be a fun and interesting reading month, especially since my schedule is calming down a bit and I should have more time to read and make more videos because I definitely want to get back into that and have a more set filming schedule and make at least a couple of videos a week because I feel bad that I've been neglecting you guys a little bit, so stay tuned for that. Starting next week there should be at least a couple being uploaded every week and I'm looking forward to it. Really quick before we get into the rest of the video, I have a fun announcement of a project that I'm going to be doing and that I hope some of you will join me in. So, I'm going to be rereading The Stand by Stephen King because there is a mini-series that is going to be premiering on December 17th. And the more I look into it, the more interested I am in the series. No matter what, even if it ends up being bad, I think it'll at least be a fun experience to watch. So my goal is to have this book read by December 17th. And unlike most of the time when I read books where I just kind of plow through it, I'm actually going to be reading in chunks. So stay tuned on my community. I'll let you know the chapters I'm going to be reading and kind of what to expect for the weekly updates of this. If you have any ideas of how to make it so I can buddy read it with you guys a little bit better, let me know in the comments below if there's a more effective way of me doing this. But I'm looking forward to it and I would love it if a lot of you decided to either read this for the first time or do a reread of it with me. So that's definitely one book I'm planning on reading for the upcoming weeks up until December 17th. So looking forward to this. So the first two books I'm going to share with you, I've actually already read this month. First one is Race the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This follows several different characters in this world where they race these monstrous creatures called Quixotes for sport. And this was super fun, so spoiler alert on my review. I really enjoyed this one. It is fantasy standalone, which I feel like there aren't enough standalones in fantasy, and it's just a lightning fast-paced book, great world building, and just I think you're going to really like this, so I'm glad that I bought myself a copy. So the next two books I'm going to share with you, I've already read for this month. First one, Race the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a fantasy standalone novel, and it takes place in this country, in this fantasy world, where they race these monstrous creatures called Quixotes for sport, and it's very ingrained in their culture and their identity. It's a very dangerous sport, but it's worth it if you can succeed, basically, as you're given lots of money and it's very popular. But there's a lot else happening in this book. The races are definitely a strong component to it, but there's so much more to this book, including like political intrigue and religion, and it's just so much more. So I will do a full review of this book, but highly recommend giving this one a go because I loved it. The other book I've already read, Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. A lot of booktubers have talked about this book and how emotional it was and brought them to tears and how good of a contemporary it is. So I decided to pick this one up and I read it in like practically an afternoon, and it follows three half-siblings. You have Grace, who ends up pregnant at 16 and gives her baby up for adoption. You have Maya, the youngest one, who is lesbian but is accepted by her family, except for she still has some complicated feelings about her adoption. And then Joaquin, who was the brother who is mixed race, and he was actually never adopted and lived his life in the system. And it's about them meeting and so much more. I really enjoyed this one as well. Definitely heartbreaking and beautifully told, and I will go more in depth on my wrap-up video, but this one was quite good too. Now we're getting into the book I'm currently on, which is The Border by Robert McCammon. So I've read almost everything Robert McCammon has written, but I haven't gotten to this one. And part of it was I've just heard some mixed things about it, and I just wanted to be in the mood for a Robert McCammon book that is one of his newer ones that I wasn't sure if I was going to like, especially because I loved The Listener and thought it was fantastic, and a lot of people like that one too. This one follows, it's pretty much an apocalyptic tale, post-apocalyptic tale, following survivors of this alien takeover. So there are these aliens that invade, and it's kind of a us versus the aliens type of story, and I'm only a couple chapters in. So far so good, and I will, let you know what I think about it, but so far it's been interesting, and, even a bad Robert McCammon novel, I still find something to enjoy. So he's a great author, and you should definitely check him out. Next book is The Shadows by Alex North. I read The Whisper Man earlier this year, back in January, before all the COVID craziness happened, and I did my big thriller binge. And I really liked The Whisper Man a lot, so I knew I had to get another book by Alex. And this one is sort of like I think it's a dual timeline story, where there was a teenager who was, I believe, part of this friend group, and they commit an awful crime way back when, like 20 years before, and then in present day there's another crime, and were the boys guilty, innocent, what's happening, and it looks like there's a serial killer and some other stuff. I haven't heard too much about this one, actually. Surprisingly, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. It might follow people I follow anyway, and so I'm definitely interested to read this book, and I'm probably going to like it. The next book is Watchers by Dean Koontz. It's funny, I have not read a Dean Koontz book in a very long time. I had a couple bad experiences with him. I've only liked one of his books, and I've just always kind of thought that Dean Koontz was kind of trash, and Stephen King is way better, because I'm a Stephen King fangirl. But I kind of want to give him another shot, and this is supposed to be one of his better novels, and it has to do with this man going hiking and finding this mysterious talking golden retriever. And at first it sounded a little silly to me, but I've heard people say just give it a chance, because there may have something to do with aliens or something else very interesting, and maybe conspiracy theories. I don't know too much about this book, but I am giving him another go, so definitely wanting to get to this one this month at some point. Next book is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. Really looking forward to this book. I almost read it in October, but I decided to put it off because I really wanted to finish a couple of the books that I was reading. But I love the 10,000 Doors of January. It was one of my favorite standalones of last year, and really it's one of my favorite standalone fantasies, maybe even the last 10 years. It was just so wonderful. This one is a little bit bigger than that book, and it has to do with sisters. There are 3 sisters, and they are kind of doing their own thing, and then they reconnect during a time where there's a big push for women's suffrage. And this seems like it is a kind of alternative United States where there were witches, and then they were persecuted, but magic is real, witchcraft is real, and it's about bringing the witches back at the same time of getting women's suffrage and getting women's right to vote. So really looking forward to this, and I think I'm going to be in for a treat for this book, so I just have to decide when I want to start it, but I think it's going to be a very enjoyable one. These next 3 books are part of a trilogy that I would like to get to, and that is this trilogy. I think it's called the Themis Files, and the first book is Sleeping Giants, Waking Gods, and Only Human. All 3 books by Sylvain Neuvel. This first book, it starts off with a girl named Rose, and she ends up biking and then gets lost, and then she ends up falling down a hole where she discovers this giant metal hand, this like ancient looking metal hand, and it turns out it's probably from some kind of robotic being or entity or something. Something put it there, and it's not of this world. Fast forward, I think a few decades maybe, and she ends up growing up to be a scientist, one of the main scientists studying this thing. And honestly, I don't know much more than that. I have heard some pretty good things about this some people didn't care for the series, but a lot of people did love it. Blake Crouch has blurbed this series, and I really like his work. It's been compared to The Martian, and I love The Martian. It's one of my favorite sci-fi books. I could reread that all the time. So I think this will be a very fun sci-fi trilogy. Who knows, there could be some horror elements depending on what happens. I haven't read the blurbs for the middle or last book in the trilogy, but I'm definitely eager to start this. I have had it on my TBR for a couple of years, and now I'm excited to finally get to it. Next book I bought a while ago, but I haven't hauled it yet, and I'm super excited to finally be getting to it and to share it to you. That's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I really like TJ Klune. He's my favorite LGBTQ, that community author, and he has this one werewolf shifter series called Green Creek, and really like those books. And I have heard nothing but amazing things about this book. I'm kind of looking for something heartwarming to read right around Thanksgiving, and I just picture reading this book after eating food at Thanksgiving curled up by a fire. And this one, it takes place, there is this gentleman who ends up investigating this home for children with special abilities and special gifts. And I think also they may also be monstrous too. I think there's just a lot of varieties of kids at this orphanage, but while the gentleman is there investigating and doing what he needs to do, there is the headmaster, and they start to form a relationship. And I've just heard it's supposed to be very charming, heartwarming, creative, feel-good story, but also highly imaginative and exciting and adventurous and all the things. So I'm looking forward to this. It's a little bit different than some books I read because I don't think it's going to be dark at all, but sometimes I am in the mood for a feel-good story, and I think this is going to be one. But also I love fantasy, so it's going to be one of those, and I'm very excited for this. I'll probably read it right around Thanksgiving. Next book is Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez. These are short stories. This is a short story horror collection written by an Argentinian woman, and I'm excited because it's funny, I briefly dated a man who was from Argentina, and I checked this out and was planning on reading it when we were dating, but I'm still going to read it now, and I don't really know too much about all of the stories. It seems like there's, like, it talks about it being like black magic and disturbing disappearances and some hypnotic prose and grace to the grotesque, and I just think it's going to be an enjoyable read, and a lot of horror fans have said they've really liked it, and it also seems to have a somewhat literary quality to it, and it'll be interesting to read about a country that, you know, I don't know a whole lot about it, so I'm eager to get to this one. Next one is a classic, and I can't believe I haven't read this one yet, but I haven't, and it's The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. This is one where a lot of people seem to really love it. It is a science fiction story, and I think originally it was published as a short story collection, but now it's lumped together as one book, if I remember correctly. And it was written a long time ago, so technically I think it's supposed to take place in the future, and it's like in the mid-2000s or something, but it's when we're beginning to colonize Mars through the end of colonization of Mars, and I'm looking forward to that. I've heard that it brings up a lot of interesting observations, and some stories or chapters are darker than others, and it's just going to be interesting to see what Ray Bradbury thought about colonization of Mars and imperialism and all of that. So looking forward to getting to this one. The last three are 3 books that I should have gotten to last month that I still want to get to this month because I'm still interested in all 3 of them. First one is The Chill by Scott Carson, and this has to do with a town that was flooded out and not all the inhabitants ended up leaving, so there's some kind of ghost town that, you know, I'm sure there's going to be supernatural activity and revenge and a lot of that happening. definitely looking forward to this. I had briefly started it and then I decided to jump into The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, which ended up being my favorite book of the month. So still wanting to get to this one because I always love a good ghost story, revenge story, supernatural happenings, and this one sounds pretty cool. Next one is You by Carolyn Kepnes. This is one of those books where like I should have read it like 3 years ago, but I just kept putting it off, and now I really am interested to read it. I've heard some good things about it. I follow Edward Lorne on his channel and have for quite some time, and he really likes this one, so I feel like I need to get to it. And it is a thriller story, and it follows a man named Joe. He works at a bookstore and he starts stalking a young woman, and it's told from his perspective as he stalks and seduces her, and he's also a total psychopath, so this should be fun. And the last book is I Remember You by Yrsa Sigurdardóttir. This is an Icelandic ghost story, and this one was also when I was starting and really liked what I had read, but I got distracted by something else. That sometimes happens to me. I don't know if it happens to you guys, but I can be very distracted when it comes to my TBR sometimes. And so I put this one down and I want to pick it back up because Iceland and ghost stories, and it's also following these three characters who go to this very small island and they're renovating a house, and they realize that they are probably not alone. They're trying to figure out what's happening, and there's also another story that's probably going to connect with the other story about a psychiatrist gentleman who has helped the police with a couple investigations, and his son had mysteriously disappeared, and somehow they're going to connect together, but I'm looking forward to getting back to this one and reading it this month. So those are the books I have on my TBR. My TBR can always change, as you guys have probably noticed, and I may not get to all of these, or I may end up buying a couple books on a whim and reading those instead, so you'll know for sure what I end up reading in my November wrap-up. But thank you all so much for watching my video. Please like, comment, rate, subscribe. Especially comment if you want to participate in my reading of The Stand. I think that would be very fun, and I would love to read it with you guys, especially some of you who have not read it before, or those of you who are also big fans of The Stand too. It'll be interesting to see what a reread is going to be like, especially for this year. So thank you all so much, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.